Millions of years ago, if you were standing exactly where the Sahara Desert is today, you wouldn't be walking on hot sand or seeing giant dunes on the horizon. Instead, you would be surrounded by water. Deep, blue water, teeming with life. Where today, there are dust storms and brutal temperatures. There was a vast ocean, teeming with marine creatures swimming on what is now one of the most hostile environments on the planet. It seems impossible to imagine this looking at the modern Sahara. But the question that intrigues scientists is as simple as it is disturbing. How does an entire ocean disappear and leave in its place the largest hot desert on Earth? Today, the Sahara is practically a symbol of extremes. The sun can raise temperatures above 50 degrees during the day. The landscape seems endless. Giant dunes move slowly with the wind, covering everything around them. Some sandstorms are so large that they can be seen from space. At first glance, it seems like an environment that has always been this way, as if it were permanent. But Earth rarely remains the same for very long. In fact, the Sahara is one of the regions of the planet that has changed the most throughout history, and the changes were enormous. Long before the first human civilizations emerged, long before Africa resembled what we see today, that region was covered by a vast ocean connected to the ancient Tethys Sea. This ocean was immense. For millions of years, it separated ancient continents and stretched for thousands of kilometers. Its waters were warm and teeming with life. Giant fish, enormous mollusks, marine reptiles, and the ancestors of many modern creatures lived there. To understand just how different that world was, imagine something even more surprising. Whales swam where today there are only dunes. Sharks patrolled waters that are now dry, broken rocks. Corals grew on reefs that are now buried under layers of sand. This is not just a theory. The evidence is scattered throughout the desert. In several regions of the Sahara, scientists have found incredibly well-preserved marine fossils. Giant shells appear embedded in the rocks. Teeth of marine predators are found in places where today there is not a single drop of water. Entire layers of sediment show patterns that only form on the ocean floor. But perhaps no discovery is as impressive as what was found in Wadi Al-Hitan. In the middle of a seemingly empty desert, researchers discovered something almost surreal. Scattered across the landscape are dozens of complete skeletons of prehistoric whales. Not just isolated bones, but entire skeletons, perfectly preserved, as if they had been left there yesterday. These whales lived about 40 million years ago. At that time, that region was part of a large tropical sea. Some of these creatures could reach more than 18 meters in length. They swam slowly in shallow waters, hunting and migrating through an ocean that simply no longer exists today. Imagine walking through a silent desert and suddenly finding the complete skeleton of a gigantic whale emerging from the sand. It's as if the planet itself is revealing a forgotten memory. But the disappearance of that ocean was not a sudden event. It was the result of gigantic forces acting slowly within the Earth. The Earth's surface is made up of enormous blocks called tectonic plates. These plates are in constant motion, albeit very slowly. Over millions of years they collide, move apart, and slide over one another. This movement is capable of opening oceans, and also closing them. That is exactly what happened to the Tethys Sea. The African plate began to move slowly northward, approaching Eurasia. This gradual movement began to compress the ocean floor. Entire regions of the seabed were pushed upward. Layers of sediment began to fold and slowly emerge from the water. Over millions of years, the ocean shrank. Some parts disappeared completely. Others turned into shallow seas. Eventually, large areas that were once submerged became part of dry land. But the story doesn't end there. Even after the ocean disappeared, the Sahara was still far from becoming a desert. For a long period in Earth's recent history, that region was incredibly green. Giant lakes dotted the territory. Rivers meandered through the landscape. Large areas were covered by vegetation similar to the African savannas. Enormous animals once lived there. Elephants, giraffes, and antelopes roamed grassy plains. Crocodiles inhabited rivers that no longer exist. Hippos rested in lakes that have completely disappeared. This surprising phase in the history of the Sahara occurred during what is known as the African Wet Period. Between approximately 15,000 and 5,000 years ago, North Africa received much more rain than it does today. Strong monsoons brought enormous quantities of water from the ocean into the interior of the continent. The result was an impressive transformation. What is now a vast desert became a landscape teeming with life, and there is fascinating evidence of this left by humans themselves. In caves scattered across the Sahara, Archaeologists have discovered rock paintings, thousands of years old. These paintings depict animals that today seem completely out of place in that environment. Hippos swimming in rivers, giraffes walking in groups, and crocodiles resting by lakes. These images are records of a completely different Sahara. But then, slowly, something began to change. The rains began to decrease. At first, the change was almost imperceptible. A lake became a little smaller. A river began to dry up during certain times of the year. Some areas of vegetation began to disappear. Over the centuries, these small changes began to accumulate. Without enough vegetation to protect the soil, the wind began to carry sand and dust everywhere. The land began to dry out more and more. Lakes disappeared completely. Rivers stopped flowing. In just a few thousand years, that vibrant landscape transformed into something completely different. The modern Sahara began to emerge. Today, it covers about 9 million square kilometers. That means it's almost the size of China or the United States. It's so large that it crosses several countries and creates a gigantic natural barrier on the African continent. Some dunes reach heights of over 180 meters. They move slowly with the wind, advancing a few meters per year. Sandstorms can lift billions of tons of dust and launch particles into the atmosphere that travel thousands of kilometers. And here's one of the most surprising details of all. This dust from the Sahara doesn't stay confined to Africa. Every year, enormous clouds of dust cross the Atlantic Ocean. After days of traveling through the air, they finally reach another extraordinary place on the planet, the Amazon rainforest. When the dust finally settles on the forest, it releases important minerals like phosphorus. These nutrients help fertilize the Amazonian soil. In other words, the world's largest hot desert helps nourish one of the most vivid forests on the planet. But even with all the accumulated scientific knowledge, mysteries still exist. One of the biggest questions is understanding exactly why the Sahara changed so rapidly. Why did a region full of rivers and lakes disappear in such a short geological time? Part of the answer lies in something that happens far away: the Earth's own movement around the Sun. The planet does not rotate in a perfectly constant way. Over thousands of years, the tilt of the Earth's axis and the shape of its orbit change slightly. These small changes alter the amount of solar energy received in different parts of the planet. When these variations strengthen the African monsoons, the Sahara receives more rain. When they weaken, the region dries out again. This means that the desert is not permanent. In fact, geological records indicate that the Sahara has alternated between green and desert phases several times throughout history, and this leads to a surprising possibility. Some scientists believe that, in the distant future, the Sahara could turn green again, lakes could reappear, vegetation could return. Animals could once again occupy regions that today seem completely dead. If this happens, the giant dunes we see today could slowly disappear beneath fields of grass and new rivers. The place that today seems like one of the most extreme environments on Earth could once again transform into something completely different. When we look at the modern Sahara, we see silence, heat, and endless sand. But beneath each layer of sand lies the history of ancient oceans, giant whales, savannas teeming with life, and enormous climate change. The desert we see today is just a temporary chapter in the history of that place. And perhaps the most striking lesson of all is realizing that planet Earth is never truly still. Oceans can disappear. Deserts can bloom. Entire landscapes can change completely over time. The Sahara is a powerful reminder that there are still incredible stories hidden on our planet's stories. So extreme they seem like fiction, but are completely real. And if you enjoy discovering these amazing phenomena on Earth, places where science and mystery meet, subscribe to the channel, because there are still many other extreme secrets of our planet waiting to be revealed in future videos.